Here we go with another week of the NASCAR weekly forecast. Welcome to a couple new fans we have. I don't really think they're fans, but they're guys that just like to follow me. And one of them likes jalapeno poppers a lot. So that's another story for another day. But last week we've been doing this show. This is our fourth week, but the first 2 weeks we had the Chicago street course. Race was shortened from 100 to 100 laps to 75 laps. Didn't work out too good for us. Wrong side of the pit cycle. Also, Atlanta the next week, there was weather. Kind of got screwed there too. Last week was in New Hampshire, my home track. I'm in the close to the I'm in the Boston area. Couldn't go, had to work on Monday, but it got postponed from Sunday to Monday because of weather. But finally a normal race, conventional race. And what do? We go 4-1. We have Truex and Harvick top fives, Keselowski a top 10, Bell top 3 really didn't hit. And then better be lucky than good. Kyle Busch is sent to the rear and then crashes out of the race. So in our matchup, Byron at plus money beat Kyle Busch. So, and then also on the side, I had Toyota to win the race, and Martin Truex Jr. won the race. So again, really using our metrics, as our new fans know, that's a very important thing. You got to really study up, especially if you have a lot of time on your hands. So, we want to make sure that we study up, and those metrics really came into play last week with the laps led, with the performance. We just stuck with it. And all practice and qualifying did was hurt the prices. So we got in before practice and qualifying, placed our bets, and it worked out for us. So this week we go to the Tricky Triangle in Pocono, in the Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania, for the High Point 400, 160 laps. Until last year, the series used to go to Pocono twice a year. Now they only go once a year. It's a nice family-owned racetrack by the Mattioli family. Great story up there. Great fan support. There's a pocket of NASCAR fans up there, in eastern Pennsylvania, the Stroudsburg area. Sneaky market there because there's a lot of tourists there, but that race really draws well. But NASCAR just had to add other stuff to the schedule. So they're keeping Pocono, but only one race. So last year, the story at Pocono, I didn't know what a front fascia was in a car, but after the race, everyone did. Is for the first time since 1960, the winner of a NASCAR race was disqualified, Denny Hamlin. So Denny Hamlin posed on the stage with the trophy. I even know a guy's bookie, not the one watching this, but another one who paid out on Denny Hamlin, even though at the end, Denny Hamlin and Kyle Busch, both at the time who were with Joe Gibbs Racing. Now, of course, Busch is with Richard Childress Racing, but at the time they were both with Joe Gibbs Racing, they were both disqualified for kind of messing with the front fascia and having, a little bit of tape on that, which helped for aerodynamics. Chase Elliott wound up winning the race. But in looking, last year, Toyotas were dominant at this track. They led 104 out of the 160 laps, and every Toyota in the race, except for Ty Gibbs, who was in the 45 last year for Kurt Busch, finished in the top 10. So Toyotas really have done well at this track. Track trends, Toyotas won 7 of the last 11. You would say 8 of the last 11 if you count the Hamlin win on the track last year. And again, so there's a couple things we have to look at. Toyotas were dominant. You have to look if you think the front fascia made a huge difference in the race. If you think it did and they quote unquote cheated to win, then you have to downgrade them. I tend not to because there's such a big sample size of them doing well at this track. And you also have to think that, the ultimate horse for course at this track is Kyle Busch. Well, Kyle Busch now switches from Toyota equipment to Chevy equipment. going from the 18 in Joe Gibbs to the 8 of Richard Childress. So again, I tend to think that Kyle Busch rides this track well. There's not a lot of comp tracks. People say Auto Club in Michigan, but not really Michigan. I think with the unique configuration of this track, it's a triangle. It's 2.5 miles, I believe, long. I think that, yeah, I like Kyle Busch here. I think he does well at this track. The race will be at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time on USA Network. Let's see what other notes I have. That's about it as far as the notes before we dive in. But Chase Elliott on paper won the race last year. But again, Hamlin and Busch ran super well. They led a lot of laps. They really dominated the race. So, this is a track that's not a super speedway, but by length, there's 160 laps, 400 miles. So by length, it's longer, but it's not a street course and it's not a super speedway, but it's not really a conventional oval. So you really got to so I think this is a week where you really have to you really have to depend and rely on track history, which we'll do in the metrics. So let's get going with that. And we're going to share the screen here. Last 10 at Pocono. As you can see, Kevin Harvick, 8.0. Byron, 9.4. Busch, 9.7. Now that takes into account the last place finish. I mean, because they were disqualified to last. So that takes into account that finish from last year, which was a 36th place finish. Oh, one other thing I want to mention before we get going. I wouldn't pay a huge attention to practice and qualifying here, is three of the last 4 winners in this race started outside the top 10, 13th, 19th, and 19th. So again, there's going to be a little bit of chaos here. There's going to be some cautions. Cautions breed cautions, as we know. So being fast in practice and qualifying, I don't think is as important as the track history. So we're going to weigh in our modeling, we're going to weigh track history a little bit more than the speed. So points, laps led, and track history are going to be more important to us this week than necessarily speed. So you got Busch, Keselowski, Truex, Hamlin, Larson, Bowman, Elliott, and Almirola is a guy we like this week as well. Last 5 performance charts. So if you look, Busch, of course, has that 38th place finish from last year. So his average finish is skewed a little in that. He actually has 2 wins, if you don't count the DQ. So Kyle Larson has run well there. Kyle Larson has only run the last 3 races at Pocono. So these are the last 5 races run, not the driver's last 5 races. So he's finished in the top 10 every time, Kyle Larson. But again, as we're going to say for the 4th week, too short of price. Harvick, 8.4. Kez, 9.4. Byron, 9.6. Truex, Almirola, Bowman, Hamlin, Wallace, and Elliott. And again, Hamlin, just like Busch, his stats are reflected in the low finish from last year because of disqualification. Laps led at Pocono, last 10. Look at Kyle Busch. I mean, Kyle Busch has been dominant there. Now, again, in Toyota equipment, but still, he has been dominant there. Harvick, Hamlin, and Truex are the only guys that have led more than 100 laps. Now, again, keep in mind this race is only 160 laps, so it's not like there's a ton. But if you look, Kyle Busch has led roughly to a quarter, 25% of the laps run, in the last 10 races. at Pocono. So been very dominant. Harvick, Hamlin, Truex, Byron, Larson, and Byron and Larson again, haven't run a ton, Larson's only been in this Hendrick equipment for 3 races here at Pocono. So Keselowski, Almirola, Blaney, and Suarez. So there we go with the last 10. And then the last 5, Busch again, 125, Hamlin, Almirola has run very well there, as has Keselowski, Truex, Byron, Bowman, Larson, Logano, and Blaney. So, but still, Busch and Hamlin, as you'll see, no secret in our plays. Again, get them early because of the value. Those guys really have done well, at Pocono in almost every metric. Average finish, laps led, and now in points, they're right there too. Busch more so than Hamlin, but Harvick has done really well there points-wise. Busch, Truex. Now, interesting thing with Truex. Truex has been a guy that actually won last week in New Hampshire. He's on fire. Him and Byron are kind of my 2 picks, to win the Cup Series. So, do you take a guy who is certainly on a heater and on a team that wins? Obviously, the markets are going to adjust. Toyotas have been very good at this track. I just don't see the value necessarily in a Martin Truex this week. Maybe take him live if he's not doing well, and then hope after the first stage, hope that he comes alive. William Byron, Keselowski, Blaney, Hamlin, again, our guy Almirola, Elliott, and Kyle Larson. And then last 3 in points, Truex has run well here. There's no denying that. Hamlin and Busch had their points taken away from last year in that race. That's why they're not up there. So, and actually, we're going to go on, and now I know how to do this. We're going to go on here. We're going to stop the screen share, and then we're going to go to here, and we're going to share this screen, and we're going to go to Pocono. And this is a great, racingreference.com is a great tool. So is iFantasy Race, and so is Highline Betting. Thank those guys every week for getting the stuff. But if you look at Kyle Busch, performance last 10 at Pocono, I mean, except for the crash in 2020 and the DQ last year, started first, won, started 5th, 3rd, started 28th, won, 2nd, win, 5th, 9th, 4th, 5th, 5th, 2nd, 19th, 1st, 2nd, but 36, so disqualified. So he's a guy who has really done well, at the track in the last 10 races. And then if you look at Hamlin's last 10, he did not do well except for the second end of the doubleheader in 21, and then the DQ last year has run very, very well at this race. 4th, 6th, 1st, 2nd, 1st, whatever, 10th to 4th, whatever, and last year 1st to 1st. So Denny Hamlin has run well. So to say that one disqualification really mars it for these guys, that's kind of misleading because they've all done well, at the track. And then the last guy we're going to look at before we get going back to the metrics is an Eric Almirola and see how he's done in his last 10. So Almirola in his last 10, he qualifies decently there, and he, is around the top 10, every time. Fords obviously, haven't been dominant there, but, his average start, again, 15.6, average finish, 14.3, and he finishes every race. Almirola is a guy that, doesn't put his car in the wrong places a lot. So he's going to finish races. He's going to be there at the end if there's attrition in the race. And then the other thing I like to look at Pocono Raceway is or any track is the number of cautions in the race. So if we can do that here. So last year, so their averages, I mean, 9 cautions, 4 cautions, 8 cautions, 8 cautions, 6 cautions. So there's going to be some cautions there. So restarts are going to be important. And, there's not a ton of passing, but there's enough passing. I mean, 15 lead changes is quite a bit. So there's, 12 lead changes, 14 lead changes, 12 lead changes. So double-digit lead changes. So that means a guy who's just up front doesn't just stay there. There's lots of lead changes. So we're going to stop the sharing again. This is racingreference.com. A great site, as is iFantasy Race and is Highline Betting as well. So last 3 Pocono points you can see there. Pocono speed rankings. So fast car, regardless of where they started. Now, this has Busch and Hamlin's real finish. So, finish before the DQ. So Busch, fastest car, finished second. Larson, second fastest, finished 7th. Hamlin won the race, but then was disqualified for the front fascia. He was 3rd. Chastain, so if you remember last year, those of you who follow the series, Chastain and Hamlin were getting into it every week. One was taking out the other, Every Monday, I watched the replay of the previous year's race, and I remembered it, but, Hamlin got into Chastain, gave him no room. Chastain tried to pass high, and Chastain got wrecked out of the race. So again, fast car, wrecked out of the race. Chris Bell, who, we've been riding a little bit, but I don't think he's historically not great here. Chase Elliott, 6th place, 3rd place. So you look at guys who had, with the exception of Larson, you look at Elliott, Suarez, and Reddick. They kind of illustrate my point. They had cars that weren't top 3 fast or top 5 fast, but they all finished in the top 5. So in other words, driving skill at this track is more important than having a fast car. Obviously, you got to have a good setup in a fast car, and Toyota has mastered that. But if you look at it, those guys were able to get the most out of their cars and finish high. So that's good. And then speed at conventional ovals. Byron was 1st for a while. Now it's Hamlin. Busch is 10th. Again, not a huge deal in terms of that. Does it make us really fancy Hamlin this week? Yes, but not because of that. That's because, it's because of his track history and as the things we discussed, if you're just tuning in. I know our buddies have been watching the whole time, but it takes into account the, laps led, points, track history, and then you look at conventional ovals. And one cool thing I did this week, and this is thanks to our friends at Highline Betting, is 4 tire pit stop times thus far in 2023. So when the team comes in and they take 4 tires, whether it's on a green flag stop or a caution stop, these are the times. So if you look, I tend more to look at the teams than the driver. So Trackhouse has 2 really good pit crews, right? Hendrick has really good pit crews, right? Gibbs kind of hit or miss, right? You look at Hamlin, Truex top 10, Bell has been victimized by the pits this year. So if you look, they're running lap times within a couple hundredths of each other. So if you separate out in the pits, in the case of, say, Chris Bell and Byron over a second, that's huge. that's huge and that's significant. So that's why, for live betting purposes, if a guy's in there, but the money stop is coming up, the last 4 tire stop you think they're going to have, William Byron has a huge edge, over a second, which is very hard to make up on the track. If you watch a race, these guys are much closer than a second between them. So that's really a metric that we like and we like to use and we like to lean on. And from a live betting perspective, once we see the track position and then we see how it's going to play out, it's almost like a college basketball coach late in the game with free throw percentages, who you want to put on the line. This is pretty, and we've had 20 races so far, so it's a pretty big sample size. So this is something I kind of consult for my in-race betting. And then my plays for the week. Eric Almirola plus 400. I would run to get that. That number is, now we looked at his finishes, but to get someone at 4-1, for a top 10, a guy who's in the, top 10 average finish rankings at this track, not a top 10 average finish, but what I'm saying is, if you look at the 10 best performers at this track, he's 10th, and then, he's 6th in the last 5, which is a little skewed because, again, but look, he's in there for laps led. Yeah, he's someone with good metrics. So to get him at 4-1 on Caesars is very, very good. Again, Harvick, great track history. You like him at plus 215. And then we're going to go Hamlin and Busch. And we're going to go Hamlin and Busch. I know it's a minus number, but I just think it's something that, again, what's value? When I first started doing this, I thought everything you played had to have a plus next to it. But now you're asking a guy in a race of 36 or 38 cars, to beat, 33 of them at a minus number. Risky proposition, but it's not based on, what these guys have done in the past. Busch, there's more of a question because he's in new equipment. Hamlin, he's in the Toyota equipment. He's run well this year. He's the fastest car on the circuit. He has good track history. I think that number after practice and qualifying, even though, as we said, it's not huge there, I think that number is going to, go to minus 200. I would hop on that now. Reddick over Harvick. The reason we like that, and it's a little insurance for our Harvick top 5 bet, is the Toyota factor. Tyler Reddick last year was in the number 8 car, Richard Childress Racing, which is Chevy. He's now in 23XI, which is Toyota. So Toyota last year, again, every one of their cars, 6 of their 7 cars finished in the top 10 in this race. Only one didn't. So Toyotas do very well at this track. I see no reason that won't continue. And then there's a prop at Caesars, Busch or Larson, to win the race at plus 290. So if you look at it, Kyle Busch already this week is 5.5-1. He's going to be, and Larson at a lot of places is 7-1. So that's by the time they get to practice and qualifying, those numbers are going to drop. Probably combined, they'll be 6-1, 7-1. Now you're getting almost 3-1, and you got 2 of them. I think it's a good play. Another play I made last week, which again isn't documented for those keeping score, but I bet Toyota to win. So when I do that, then all my live plays are going to be another manufacturer, right? Because I have all those Toyotas. If they win, I win. So it's kind of a way to hedge a little bit. So again, Truex won the race. I had Toyota to win. This week, Chevy to win is something that I like because there's a little more value than Toyota to win. So maybe if I do Chevy to win, then, if those, but it's going to be tough because those Toyotas it might be hard to do a manufacturer bet this week because Toyota's just so dominant. Ford, the value is definitely there, but again, they haven't done great at this track. historically. So another week of the NASCAR Weekly Forecast in the books. Hope you guys liked it, especially our new viewers. If they're still watching, eat those jalapeno poppers. And we'll be back next week. This week, again, is Pocono, 2:30 on Sunday. And again, last week, not to pat ourselves on the back, but, we got a race that held true to form. There wasn't a J.J. Yaley or a Justin Haley in the top 10. All my names in the top 10 were playoff drivers. So that shows that the cream rises to the top. It does as well at Pocono. So it's a little more predictable. And again, that's why we like NASCAR a lot, because if you look at NASCAR of the cars on the starting grid every week, equipment-wise, I always equate it to, if you're in a golf tournament, and I know we have a lot of golfers out there, if we're in a golf tournament, and you have one guy playing with a metal wood and one guy playing with a wood, the guy with the metal wood is going to have a decided advantage. Now, in a golf tournament now, they all play the best equipment, so that's equalized. They all play the same ball. In NASCAR, these teams, Rick Ware Racing doesn't have the budget as a Joe Gibbs Racing. So again, that's why, a J.J. Yaley hasn't finished in the top 10 since 2013. And, so there's a huge disparity in terms of, the way these guys are compensated, the quality of the crew chief, quality of the team. I know when I did the podcast last year with Vegas Horse Pools, and we talked about that, I said a team is very important, the organization top to bottom. And I really believe that. So I think now we're getting into weeks where you can, eliminate a big part of the field and just focus on the guys with the best equipment and the best track history. And again, the markets are going to reflect it. Like if I would empty the mortgage, and a couple other things, as those guys know. I would empty them if I saw Kyle Busch at plus 130, not plus 130, because the markets are adjusting. Same with Hamlin. But again, there's great numbers to be had on Eric Almirola and Kevin Harvick this week. They're great numbers to be had. Keselowski, decent number. I think he's plus in the top 10. But again, everyone, good luck this week. And we love doing this. We'll see you next week. Thanks, guys.